Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington. President Biden's allies have made it abundantly clear that he must prove his ability publicly for voters to see if he wants to rescue his candidacy. Now, that effort by the president begins in earnest today with his first network interview since last week's disastrous debate and a crucial battleground rally. Right now, President Biden is speaking to an overflow room of supporters in Wisconsin after telling crowds just a moment ago that he wasn't going anywhere, while criticizing those who are trying to push him out of the race.
We had a little debate last week. Can't say it was my best performance.
We love it, Joe.
But ever since then, there's been a lot of speculation. What's Joe going to do? Is he going to stay in the race? Is he going to drop out? What's he going to do? Well, here's my answer. I am running and going to win again. I'm the nominee of the Democratic Party. I'm the nominee of this party because millions of Democrats like you just voted for me in primaries all across America. You voted for me to be your nominee. No one else. You, the votes. The voters did that. And despite that some folks don't seem to care who you voted for, well, guess what? They're trying to push me out of the race. No! Well, let me say this as clearly as I can. I'm staying in the race. I'll beat Donald Trump. I will beat him again in 2020.
The president's most definitive public comments yet that he is staying in the race. And also today, President Biden is sitting down with ABC News in an interview that will air in prime time. He'll have to answer directly for his debate performance, his campaign's lackluster response, and the growing number of voters, donors, and supporters who fear his candidacy is no longer viable. It comes as CNBC reports that wealthy Democratic donors, including an heiress to the Disney family fortune, say they will no longer fund the party until President Biden ends his campaign. All while Democrats on Capitol Hill signal they're nearing a breaking point due to the campaign's failures.
We needed a boost from Thursday. We didn't get it. And the campaign has been very, I think, arrogant in their response. We want to know what their plan is to win this election and turn these numbers around. And if they don't have a plan, then I think we have to move in a different direction.
So you're to be determined, but you're not saying you're absolutely supporting him.
I don't think we can at this point. The point is to win the election.
Meanwhile, accounts of President Biden's struggles behind the scenes continue to plague his campaign and his presidency. An anonymous senator told my NBC News colleagues, quote, the country saw at the debate what those of us who have had personal interactions with him have all known for the last 2.5 years. Also this, Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey put out a statement pushing the president to consider stepping aside if that's what voters want, saying, quote, over the coming days, I urge him to listen to the American people and carefully evaluate whether he remains our best hope to defeat Donald Trump. NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli is on the ground in Wisconsin, where President Biden spoke earlier today. He has been reporting this story out since the debate. And also with me is CNBC political finance reporter Brian Schwartz. Thanks so much to both of you for starting us off on a very busy Friday. Memoli, I have to start with you. Look, this was a fired up Joe Biden. We heard his defiance. The campaign is billing today's speech as the beginning of a July push. What were your key takeaways today?
Well, Kristen, I just found this speech so fascinating because as you ended there with the new comment from Governor Healey of Massachusetts saying that the president should listen to those voices, to the American people about whether to stay in the race, the defiant tone from not just the president but his whole team is he is listening to those voices. He had an enthusiastic, energetic crowd here cheering him on, saying they support him going forward. He really basked in that adulation, staying out, shaking hands. He even came back after working that rope line to say he won't soon forget this day. And that really speaks to something of a disconnect, a clash really that's being set up here, at least as far as the Biden team is, between sort of the party elites, those campaign donors who are, frankly, never have been true Biden believers to begin with, who now saw this moment of significant weakness. And we can't understate that, Kristen. This was a devastating debate performance, and some of the public polling is bearing that out already. But that he still sees a path to victory. He still sees, as he laid out in rather blunt terms, the voters of the Democratic Party across this country in primary after primary nominated him to be the nominee again, and he's not just going to give that up. It was also, though, worth noting, we heard some of the most really strong rhetoric directed at Donald Trump that we've heard from this president so far, ending his speech by saying we need to exile Donald Trump politically, talking about what that immunity decision from the Supreme Court earlier this week might mean for the country if Donald Trump were put back into the Oval Office. And so that speaks to another effort here on the part of the Biden team. When he struggled in his 2020 candidacy in that crowded Democratic Party, he would often try to raise the stakes by making this not about him versus the Democratic Party and the candidates running against him in the primary, but him against Donald Trump. And we're seeing that yet again right now, Kristen.
We certainly are, Mike. There's no doubt about that. Let's talk about the big interview tonight, his first television interview. The stakes of this interview, Mike, for all the reasons you just mapped out, could not be higher. Talk about how he's preparing and what we can expect to see tonight.
Well, that's what with the volley back from those who are really concerned about President Biden moving forward and what that might mean in November would be that he gave that fiery speech off the teleprompter, and that there is not necessarily concern that the president can't deliver a set of remarks with, fire and energy when he's reading it from the teleprompter before a very supportive crowd. It's what is he like in the Oval Office on a long day during a crisis? Can he answer tough questions from a tough interviewer like George Stephanopoulos? So I think there are a lot more people who are going to be interested in seeing what that conversation is like and how the president is able to answer some of those tough, direct questions more than what he does on the campaign trail. And it goes without saying, Kristen, there's very little margin for error for President Biden going forward. It's not going to be enough to just have one strong speech, one strong interview. Every misstep going forward is going to be scrutinized, and that's where the Democratic critics of him at this point are concerned, that they don't want to see the focus on President Biden. They want to see it on former President Trump and what they believe would be a catastrophe if he's put back in the Oval Office.
You're absolutely right. Every single word, every single move will be scrutinized of President Biden's. Brian, let me turn to you. You've been all over this reporting about donors. Mike, of course, talked about the polls. That's one data point. But the donors are a major data point as well. I spoke with one Democratic ally to the president who said, look, if the money dries up, that's the ball game, basically. Tell us what your latest reporting is as it relates to donors.
Well, Kristen, listen, there has become this outright rebellion in the Democratic Party in some cases by major Democratic donors and financiers against Joe Biden. Let's just not, mince words here. And one of them that emailed me on July 4th was Abigail Disney, the heiress to the Disney family fortune. She told me, I intend to stop any contributions to the party unless and until they replace Biden at the top of the ticket. If Biden does not step down, the Democrats will lose. Of that, I am absolutely certain the consequences for the loss will be genuinely dire. I mean, and that is a stunning set of comments from Disney to me. And it's really some of the more strong remarks that I've received from donors. But again, it's just one step above some of the sentiment we've been hearing throughout the last few days.
You're right. And the fact that it's on the record, the fact, again, that it hits at the heart of the campaign, that we're talking about the money, and that really is the core of it. We also, of course, saw that you had reporting on Reed Hastings, who's another major Democratic donor. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Reed Hastings is coming out and saying that it's time for Joe Biden to step down. But one of the things that was missing in his comments as to exactly what does that mean for Mr. Hastings himself. And that's the key here for Biden and the Democrats. The truth is that, donors can come out and say anonymously or on the record to me that Joe Biden needs to go. But to something we're kind of touching on here, the key to this is that if the money is going to dry up, and that really could be a serious problem for both Biden and the party at large. And there's only so many people who are willing to go on the record and tell us that. And that is critical. But on the other hand, as Mike kind of just touched on here, with the interview coming up on ABC, the donors are going to be watching that interview very, very carefully in every single public appearance going forward. And the way it's been described to me is that if it's anything short of a home run, both the interview and the statements by Joe Biden from now until the convention, they are going to continue to be concerned, and that the actions, which is key to this, could start ramping up a little bit by many more donors if this continues for the president.
And Mike, what are you hearing from your sources on all of this? the fact that you have donors who are pulling out, cash drying up, the concern about that, as Brian says, they're all going to be watching this interview very closely tonight.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Kristen. As one prominent Democrat put it, somebody with deep connections to the donor community, he said there is concern. They are going to make this decision not on emotion, but on data and on the money flow. And he said those are very often very much linked. And so the question is there this kind of grassroots support for the president that might sustain him in the absence of those high dollars? Remember, President Biden was the first Democrat to raise $1 billion, the first presidential campaign of any party to raise $1 billion. He was on track to potentially raise almost $2 billion when you combine some of those affiliated super PACs. The Biden campaign has been very careful in reading out some of these strong fundraising numbers in the last few weeks to try to give us the sense that the grassroots of the party is still with him. But we haven't gotten the kind of precision in delineating what are some of those big dollar events that were still on the books that they're using to pad the small dollars that are still coming in and what aren't. So that's going to be an important thing for the Biden campaign to keep saying going forward. And it is really striking, Kristen, as I was talking to some voters here, they do think that there is that same disconnect, that this is all a manufactured panic on the part of those who were never supporters of Biden to begin with to try to get him out of the race, and that they still stand firmly behind him. But the question is, are there enough of them going forward?
That is one of the key questions we are asking. Fantastic reporting. Thank you so much, Mike and Brian. Really appreciate it. Joining me now on set is Julia Manchester, national political reporter for The Hill, Democratic strategist Ameshia and Republican strategist Rick Tyler. He is also an NBC News political analyst. Thanks to all of you for being here. Julia, let me start with you. Set the stage heading into tonight. Mike Memoli talked about the fact that the stakes could not be higher. Voters are going to be watching. Donors are going to be watching very closely. What does President Biden need to do in order to start to turn the page, if that's even possible?
This is a make or break moment for President Biden. He needs to do two things. Number one, he needs to explain what's been happening over the past week. We've seen a number of these stories since the debate come out, talking about what the president's cognitive and mental abilities have been over the past, 2.5 years or so from Democratic sources. He needs to put those to bed if he wants to get through this. He needs to talk about some of the explanations he's given for his performance during the debate, including being jet lagged, despite the fact he was traveling he got back from his overseas travels 12 days before the debate. So there's definitely a lot of explaining he needs to do. But, I think Mike Memoli talked about this in his report. This isn't the end for Biden. He's going to have to do a lot more to really make up for the damage that's already been done.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Rick, pick up on that point. You've been in campaigns. You know what it's like when you have that moment, that feeling of we're down, are we actually out? Is this recoverable? I mean, as Julia is saying, he has to do more than tonight's interview.
I don't have any happy news. Cognitive decline, number one, is not recoverable. It gets worse, and it is sad.
If that's what it is.
If that's what it is. And the moment does not come tonight. The moment already came. It was in a debate. People are not deciding whether Biden can get through the next press conference or the next interview. They were deciding whether he could get through the next 4 years. That test came last week during the debate, and he failed that test. I don't think it's recoverable. And the White House is acting, in my opinion, unseemly and undignified, as if Joe Biden was some sort of racehorse, and we're going to race into Wisconsin. We're going to go do this and that, and some people, other Democrats, are suggesting we'll do town halls. Well, why don't we hike him up Mount Hood, jump him out of an airplane? Like, this is completely undignified, and I just don't see that it's recoverable. And the final thing, as you are well aware, is that there's a phenomenon in the media called blood in the water. You watched it when Governor Andrew Cuomo resigned. It just was not going to go away until he resigned. And this is not going to go away. This is going to dog Biden in the campaign from now until Election Day. And I don't see how he can prove that we didn't watch what happened in the debate.
Ameshia, pick up on that point, and specifically this idea of how the campaign, how the White House is handling it, because some Democrats have privately expressed frustration to me that there's nothing to see here. The poll numbers are dropping, but not by that much. And it was one debate. We can just turn the page on that. There's a frustration among some Democrats that the White House and the campaign is not being straight with them.
Well, I think that the moment is a summation of events. It's not going to just eradicate itself by however the interview goes tonight. And I think that the president and his campaign team are aware of that. I do concede that in the days post the debacle of the debate that we all watched, the campaign should have had him more frontal. They should have been able to react more quickly. They should have understood that at that point, the American people, and millions of them watched, in addition to millions of people abroad as well, saw this as a really flailing moment for the president, and that because it had been in the ether for a while, most of it from conservative sources, that this was a president who wasn't all there, that he had some cognitive decline, that this wasn't necessarily going to be helpful. To a point that was made earlier, we do not have proof of said cognitive decline. All we have now is proof of a really bad debate. Yep. That doesn't mean that you should pull out. But if your campaign cannot get it together and get it together quickly, then we're going to have a different discussion. And I think that the campaign team he currently has proven themselves not necessarily the most helpful to meet this moment, and that's a dangerous place to be.
Well, and that brings me to something that The Economist, an editorial in The Economist, let me read you all part of it. This was from yesterday. They write, "It was agony to watch a befuddled old man struggling to recall words and facts. His inability to land an argument against a weak opponent was dispiriting, but the operation by his campaign to deny what tens of millions of Americans saw with their own eyes is more toxic than either, because it's dishonesty that provokes contempt. Mr. Biden's claim that this election is between right and wrong is ruined by the fact that the existence of his campaign now depends on a lie." Julia, those are incredibly tough words. Are you hearing amongst the president's allies them echo similar sentiments, which is sort of the crux of what we're talking about?
Yeah, we're hearing that from Republicans, obviously, but Democrats privately. And we get the sense that the number of Democrats that are going to come out and publicly echo that could be growing. Because, you know, it's one thing to talk about this in a political sense of a campaign. You know, the guy needs to win. Democrats need to win down ballot. But also, and Ameshia talked about this with the foreign audience, our allies, our adversaries are watching. And there's a real question as to America's strength under Donald Trump and Joe Biden and the choice we've been given. And there's a question about that the questions over those cognitive abilities and, you know, whether that could be taken advantage of.
Yeah, speaking of, you take me to a soundbite from Jens Stoltenberg, who, of course, is the head of NATO. Let's listen to what he has to say about this.
Do you truly believe that President Biden is mentally and physically fit enough to lead the biggest nuclear-armed ally for now and for the next 4.5 years? And in your dealing with him recently, have you noticed any decline in his condition? Thank you.
Also, I have worked with President Biden for several years, also before he became president. That has been very good cooperation. I met him just a couple of weeks ago. We had good meetings in the Oval Office.
Ameshia, that was a little bit of a dodge, but it proves the point that Julia is talking about. Our allies are watching very closely.
No, absolutely, and that was an exquisitely poor response. Nobody's going to have faith after seeing that. I think that this president has more than proven himself. We saw his reactions with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We've seen his reactions and his pushback against Israel's invasion of Gaza. We've seen those conversations and him be on the front lines of some of what I would consider in the modern era some of the biggest issues of our time. One debate performance does not eradicate his decades worth of experience or his experience serving in this present day debacle we've seen across the globe when it comes to the rise of authoritarianism. However, I do think that the onus is on him to prove that he is up to the job for the next 4 years, and his campaign has to do a much better job of ensuring that people have faith in that.
And Rick, I mean, the Biden campaign has made the argument, the president has made the argument from the beginning, frankly, going back to 2020, that Donald Trump is a threat to the country's democracy, that's how high the stakes are. And so it does raise the question, is he the strongest person? If you look at the polling right now, Vice President Harris is in striking distance of Trump. She's about 2 points out. She actually does better than Biden. This is what former President Trump had to say about the vice president. Take a look.
Kick that old broken down pile of crap.
Yeah.
It's a bad guy. He just quit, you know. He's quitting the race.
Is that right?
Yep, I got him out of the race. And that means we have Kamala. I think she's going to be better. She's so bad. She's so pathetic.
It's so amazing.
It's just so bad.
So the Biden campaign fired back, talked about how disrespectful those comments were to the vice president. What I see in those comments is that he might be a little bit nervous about running against a Kamala Harris. It gets more complicated all of a sudden.
It's all an unknown. It is very, I mean, Look, we've never seen this before. I've never attended an open convention in either side. I have to say I would love to see one, but this is right now Biden is a known known. Kamala Harris is a known unknown. So what I do know is right now, currently, this race is out of reach. Biden will not beat Trump as of this moment, and I don't see that changing. And the Democratic Party has got to face up to that reality that they're not going to change those numbers. And if Donald Trump is an existential threat, and by the way, I've applauded Biden's achievements on foreign policy. I don't agree with those domestic policy, and he should be lauded for that. But is he going to suffer the indignity of losing because he's not able to campaign effectively? The Democratic Party is going to have to decide that. And then they got to decide if they do replace him, are they going to replace him with someone who can actually win votes and beat Trump? And that's going to be tough because the convention is controlled by the progressive wing of the party, and that's not going to attract people in the middle.
And Ameshia, that's what's so fascinating. I mean, you do have some of the president's allies, Congressman Clyburn, for example, very clear he does not want to see the vice president jumped over if, in fact, President Biden does make that very difficult decision to step down.
No, absolutely. And I think that it would be ahistorical to see a vice president get stepped over in this process. First and foremost, all of the fundraising thus far would automatically be hers. We're also talking about the fact that, like, the entire Finish the Job campaign is essential to also have the vice president finish that job. And as a black woman, it would be quite frankly disgusting to see the first sitting vice president who happens to be black pushed aside for these candidates who have not been tried, tested at all. And I think that, former chairs of the CBC, current chairs of the CBC, other black elected officials and non-black elected officials should fully understand why this is important, specifically because the black community is the largest base and voting bloc that is consistent for the Democratic Party.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.